Oh, good. All right. Well,
Yeah.
okay. I think we're good to go here.
Great.
Let's gavel this to order. Alex Betsold. Am I pronouncing your name
Hmm.
correct?
Yeah,
Okay, great.
that's it.
I appreciate you reaching out. I put a line out on Facebook a couple weeks ago, or maybe last week. I don't remember when, and just being like, I want to talk to people. If you want to talk, reach out. And you sent me a very nice message, and
Right.
you had some things you wanted to sort of, I don't know whether it was get off your chest or just talk about,
Right.
but
Well, this is, honestly something interesting because like the moment in which I messaged you, that was what, like 2.5 days ago or
yeah,
something,
something like that. Yeah.
something like that. And that was kind of like a off the cuff, like, you know what, I was having like I was like, feeling some feelings in that moment. And I've been thinking about it because
Mm-hmm.
basically what I messaged you is I said like, I have some grievances, that was kind of like the tone of it. And I'm just like, eh.
No, it's fine. I mean,
I don't know.
I understood what you meant. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm a big person. Like for me, my mo is I try. I don't always. I'm not always successful, but I try to think about what someone's intent is when they write something.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's harder to do when they write something. But I think I knew what you meant. I mean, it. I have. I wouldn't say well grievances is maybe a word, but I have some issues with the way the educational system functions and
Right.
how we teach music and how we prepare people for the professional world. But I'm curious, like what I mean. I'm happy to get in as any. I mean, I'm not going to drag us in any deep waters that neither one of us want to be
Right.
in. But
Well, that's the thing. Like I was thinking, and I was talking to some friends about it. Actually, I and just friends who I'm close to who know my story pretty well, and I like what I don't want to do is just like this happened to me and I don't like it. Like I do have like some specific like things that people did that I wish they didn't do.
mm-hmm.
But like I don't know how useful that is to like I don't think it's I don't well I'll answer I don't think it's very useful. You know what I mean? Like
Well,
I do have some specific things that I'm like, I wish that person didn't do that, and in the strongest possible terms, I wish that person didn't do that. But I don't know how useful it is to like, to do that. Like I risk just like just sounding like a whiny quitter. You know what I mean? But
well, yeah, no. I mean, I know what you're saying, and
yeah,
I think we can do this without naming names, while also just being
yeah.
like, these are experiences that we had, and there's a lot of
Well,
people sharing experiences right now, and so it's okay.
for sure. And I, kind of, I was trying to think like, if I go on Josh's podcast, like what's like, obviously like the genesis of it was like I was just upset and you had posted that thing and it was like it was like the perfect storm of like me just like going down like a little rabbit hole on my own time and seeing that and I was just like, you know what, send
Well,
tweet,
let's. I mean, let's get into it and not. I mean,
yeah,
let's again. Like I'll be respect. I mean, everybody that you mentioned. I won't go into detail of what you mentioned in the message, but
for sure,
in general, the sort of general vibe was that like, yeah, being a student, there were things that your teachers sometimes may have said to you or your colleagues or the way you had to sort of jump through certain hoops in school
yeah,
don't make sense and you don't understand why certain things happen the way they do
yeah.
and
Well, it's all just kind of like just kind of the way things shook out was not ideal.
well let me
Which I think is a fair way to say it.
do you mind me asking like in particular like what do you mind sharing something in particular that like
I don't
really
mind sharing at all. I think that and this is when like like the astute listener is going to be able to like put the pieces together. But I went to graduate school, as a lot of us do. I went to UMass for my undergraduate. I studied with Ayano.
mm-hmm,
One of the most wonderful experiences anyone could possibly have. She's the best.
mm-hmm.
And then I went to graduate school to get my just master's degree in percussion performance, and the wheels kind of started to slowly fall off for a number of reasons, some of which having to do with like the relationships and interactions I had with some teachers that I had
Mm-hmm.
there, and and probably just as much having to do with like just like those my relationship wasn't in the greatest spot. And like, there was, my grandmother passed away like slowly and tragically, like the whole time I was there. So there was just a lot of stuff. And like, I was still like, for all, and I was a child, you know what I mean?
How old are you now, and how old were you then?
I'm 30 now,
Okay.
and I was, I don't know, whatever age you are when you go right to your master's degree after
Like
I was like
24.
23, 22 or something.
Okay.
And, there was just a lot of stuff, as far as like the school side of it, I found that, at UMass studying with Ayano, through Ayano, I got to know Stuart Saunders Smith really well. And that kind of like, just the way Ayano and then through her and then Stuart just kind of like, I don't know, they just kind of like guided my taste, because when you're that age, a person's taste is like really easy to kind of like to steer a little bit. And I found like in his music and like, a lot of the stuff that Ayano was interested in, like I was like, I really latched onto it, like the performance art theater, poetry, while, stuff like that. I was like, wow, this stuff is really fantastic. And before we get too far in the weeds, like you guys also were just like a huge like North Star for me, and I assume thousands of other people in our situation.
Why do you say that? I mean, I appreciate you saying that, but it's, again, like when I said earlier, like I don't know what my North Star is. Like it's
right. Well, I'm telling you, for a lot of people, it's you guys, and I'm sure you've heard that before, but
well, it's terrifying. It's terrifying.
It's true, and it's for the right reasons, and I'll say the ones that I can remember right now. So you guys, like, you like got together at school, right? And so like, when I was young, when I was at UMass, and even after, I was like, there was a point where like, if somebody asked me like what my goal was in art, I would have literally said to be a member of So Percussion. Like, that would have been the honest answer. And like, I didn't know how these things worked. I was probably 17, and they were like, what do you want to do? I was like, I want to do that, exactly that. I want to be one of those 4 guys. When one of those 4 guys decides to hang it up, I want to be the next guy. That was what I thought. And then obviously you realize that that's like not really how that works. And then I was like, well, okay, so now I want to like. And like, you guys came around once or twice, and you were like, and I think you had said something about like, and I'm paraphrasing and probably misremembering, but I think you said this specifically. You had said like, so many people who go to this school and schools like this, they're much taller than the you must be this high to hack it line, and so like after that, what matters is that you're a good hang, and like I remember you said that, I was like a sophomore or something at UMass, and you said that, and that has stuck with me, because you can apply that to any situation really, when you're trying to work with people, and so hearing that, and like I was like, okay, so it's going to be people I meet at school, and then we're going to form a group, and then we're going to do this, blah, 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 blah. So like that kind of became like the guiding line. So it puts like a huge focus. And then Ayano's program is, it's chamber music. So it's like, it kind of like everything kind of like coalesced into like one way that made sense to me, and that's kind of just how my taste got formed, I suppose. And then I'm trying to not to get too far off track here. So I go to graduate school, right? And at this point, I feel really confident about like, if you had asked me, right before my first semester of graduate school, it's like, what do you like? you're an artist, right? And I would be like, yes, I am. You know, like what are the things that you want to like accomplish as an artist? And I would have said I want to champion the music of Stuart Saunders Smith.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I want to form a a new music collective of some kind, um, and that can like basically like like a chamber music union essentially.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's probably the answer I would have given.
Yeah.
These two things I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
That and then as like a third thing, it's like I want to change. I feel strongly that like the stuffiness of new music
Mm-hmm.
and like classical music is like I want to find ways to break that down.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think we can still have really challenging and interesting art being performed without like I don't know. I feel like I can deliver this in a package to people that also didn't go to music school.
Right.
I felt like
right.
I could do that, you know, or I wanted to learn that language.
Right. So these were your sort of three main thoughts going into grad school.
Okay. Yeah, and I felt like I had the, you know, I was already like the whole like, you know, pieces where you're making a sound and you're also saying a thing. You know what I mean? Like this is huge for
Mm-hmm.
like because so many more people are interested in poetry than are interested in like glockenspiel solos.
Well, I mean, it's something that like, I mean, the spoken word as art is something that is every movie you watch, every
yeah, exactly. It's
speech
so
by a
much easier
president,
to...
whether it's Donald Trump or Barack Obama,
right. Exactly.
there's purpose behind the way way the words are written and the way they're delivered.
Right.
I mean, say what you want about Trump, there was his way of delivering those words was effective, and I think when
Yeah.
yeah, but all that is to say is like it's true that those things hold words mean there's narrative to it, and so like even with like
sure.
with And Points North where or songs 1 through 9, like where the narrative is maybe a little abstracted. When somebody in the audience hears
there's meaning.
When somebody hears the words "gleaning minotaur," they may not know what those two words mean together, but they know what gleaning is and they know what a minotaur is. Like
minotaurs.
Yeah, so audiences are out of, you know. So anyway, just to say, like I think I have been surprised at the sort of like that it's like the weird thing whenever you're going to do theater percussion. It's like every other art form talks. Why are we the only ones?
Yeah. It's like why don't we like tap into, you know, I feel like sometimes I feel like, you know, musicians, specifically ones who have like studied in conservatories or like in college, are like intimidated by like the literary criticism side of things. Like there's this whole like this whole level of discourse that like that perhaps they're like afraid to like the mysticism of music. It's like they're, you know, it's like no, you can do both. Like the skills transfer. You just need to like learn the vocabulary and stuff.
Right.
So these are things that I felt really strongly about. And you know, I was discouraged. I don't know. Maybe I was discouraged from perhaps putting as much of my time and effort into these pursuits
when you got to grad
perhaps
school.
as I wanted to in graduate school.
Okay. And I think that like I'm curious, like as you're saying these things, like I don't want to like normalize the experience you're having, but one of my experiences too coming to Yale was like, you know, I came from.
Oh, I'm sure I'm not unique.
No. I don't want to discount your experience either. But you're saying things that are like, oh yeah, I remember when I came to Yale and Bob Van Cise had like never heard a steel drum before, and I was like, what?
Right?
You crazy man?
Like, well,
I grew up my whole life. I've been to Trinidad. Like, what do you mean? Like,
exactly. You're like, this is important to me, and I can explain to you why it should be important to you. Right. You know, but then people don't want to hear that.
Well, so I mean, do you think now that you're how did that affect you in that moment? What were some? You also laid out some other things that were going on in your life too that were extenuating circumstances, like your grandmother getting sick.
And it certainly, you know, it didn't make the things going on in lessons and classes any easier.
Right.
and I would say there was no like direct involvement. It just like the degree of difficulty just was that much higher, just because like there's this you know what I mean, like, you know,
Yeah.
my grandmother and I were very close, and it's like it was rough. It was like really, it's
Yeah.
like it's still rough, you
Yeah.
know. But did you
I was just so like when you first start, like when it first smacked you that maybe like the ecosystem, the new ecosystem that you're in, maybe doesn't traffic in the same tastes or the same sort of
right?
circles. Well, how did that
So yes,
hit you?
so in that situation, I think, you know, imagine you're me, and you grew up in Western Massachusetts, and then you went to UMass Amherst, which is also in Western Massachusetts,
Mm-hmm.
and then you like you get a chance to study at a school that's 1,000 miles away with a person who is widely considered to be the best
Mm.
at like a thing, and some other things too.
Mm-hmm.
It's like this, you know, extraordinarily dynamic performer and personality,
Mm-hmm.
and you go there and you're like, I want a piece of that, you know. And like I went without a TA because I was like, I can't pass this up, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just paying, it's like all loans, you know. And I'm there, and I'm just like writing these checks for my future,
Mm-hmm.
you know, just like a lot of money, you know, just like I'll probably never pay it off. And I'm there, and I'm like, and like the first, and I'm just like, I'm so invested mentally, financially, everything. And I'm there, and I'm so far from home, and it's like, and at this point I am like, you like imagine, like you're like, I want to do this thing, and you're just like, no, do this thing instead. and and like, but I feel really strongly about this thing, and that other thing, just like, I don't know what I'm supposed to get out of that, you know. And but then your brain is immediately like, you've invested so much in this person has this type of career, they obviously know better. And I just, I convinced myself that I was wrong,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And I convinced myself that I was wrong a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I convinced, you know, and it's just, and that kind of began this like, that's when my mental health like really just, everything just kind of, you know, flipped over, because I was consistently, um, because I came in with convictions and things that I believed. And then I was, you know, and I don't know, my memory of the situation is that I was quickly told that these things weren't worth spending time on, or that I had such egregious deficiencies in other areas that time must be spent on them. And, you know, I don't.
That's sorry to interrupt. I mean, that's
Yeah,
one of the thing. The last thing you said about like the deficiencies. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, as a college educator, I'm not a full time professor
right.
anywhere. I'm adjunct at NYU. I run the steel band program there. I do some chamber music, and then I run a steel band program with Kendall Williams at Princeton, and so is residents there. I've only taught like undergrad percussionists like in a program a little bit at Bard College. I don't teach there anymore, but so getting a taste a little bit of like, oh man, like I'm used to coming in and being the fairy dust guy, coming in and being like, be a good hang, and then I walk out like with my cape,
Right,
and
right,
everybody's
right,
like,
right.
that was amazing. It's like, that's,
You're not necessarily in the trenches. Yeah.
no, it's easy. It's the easiest job on the
Yeah.
planet to come in and point out the most
Right.
obvious things about the people I've met
Right.
for the first time. And you know, the most obvious things aren't
Right.
like you're a bad person or you have a bad time. It's usually like give a cue, you know, and those and those sorts of. But like teaching someone over 5 years or 4 years or even over 2 in a master's program is a wholly different thing. And
Right.
there is a feeling in academia that your job as a teacher, and I remember getting this less from my undergrad teacher and more from Bob at Yale, was like his mission was to get me a job. That's all he talked about,
Right.
and that's all he talked about with all of his students was like, I've got to get you work. And there was this sense that in one hand it was like, yes, both, some of it is like you want to have your students do well so that your reputation increases so that you can recruit more students for your program. Like that.
Yeah, and so this is where the not sorry to interrupt,
Mhm.
but that whole thing, that just goes so against like the philosophy that's kind of come up around like me digesting
Mhm.
what the heck happened to me
Yeah.
in graduate school is just so in opposition to that idea.
Well, and it is for me.
Like,
It is to me too. And I want to be careful here to not like the thing that's hard to say to you all in master classes about like my position, like my path in particular. Like, yeah, I work hard. Yes, I practiced I did
yeah, of
the
course you do.
12 hours a day when I was in grad school. I did the whole. Yeah, of
Mm-hmm.
course. But
Yeah,
I got the job because I graduated at the exact same time Doug Perkins quit, and I happened to play the fourth part in third construction, which was the part that Doug played, and it was like that's a part
right.
I chose when I was an undergrad at the University of Akron. Like there wasn't a series of choices I made in Akron that was like if I just played this part, that's the part Doug played. Like the thing you were saying, like I want to
Well, yeah.
replace, you know,
In order to do that, you would have had to learn all the parts. In
but
order,
it's
like.
but it's like I can sort of reverse butterfly effect my life and be like, oh, thank God I made all these decisions, but that's not
Right.
why I made those decisions. So there was a sense that it was a complete fluke of timing that I landed
Right.
where I did. But I get that when I was in grad school there were two paths. You could be you could be in an orchestra, or you could teach at a college. That was it.
Right.
And I was an ed major, and like being a band director was like you would be a pariah if I had gone to Yale and then graduated with my master's degree and turned down percussion to go be a fifth and sixth grade band director. I think no one would view me as a success, but that's not true.
Well, yeah,
That's
that's the problem. Yeah, no, I 100% agree. You absolutely like. Yeah, that's the thing. It's so frustrating. Is that like and it's taken me so long to realize it. Like I had suspicions when I was in it. I
mm-hmm.
was like, this doesn't seem right. But then I would be like, no, I have so much to do.
Right.
I have to do all these things. But like now that I've had so much time to like, work on it and work on myself, like, I think it just seems so wrong. Like like to kind of the whole like the fact that there seems to be such a set curriculum for like for the master's degree in percussion, right? Like it is kind of it kind of irks me because like a master's degree is like that's a terminal degree.
It was for me anyway. I knew it was going to be terminal because I didn't want to get my doctorate. I had no desire to go do that.
And it's like once people started getting, it's just like what you hear is like, well, during your undergrad, you just like you get and then like you during your master's degree, you have to like execute the curriculum, and then during your doctorate, when you're doing research, you can play the music you want, and it's just like, man,
I had a moment. I mean, one of the things about all of the people you're talking about all studied with Bob. I know all the members. All the members of So. I know that all of the members in So studied with Bob. Mm-hmm. And so in terms of how like there's a certain type of like psychological scarring that came with studying with Bob for me personally, where he was the first person, and I say that now as a 41-year-old, I am becoming a tiny bit more empathetic and grateful for some of the ways I was spoken to that I didn't at the time. Bob was the first person in my life. I was playing Beethoven 1 on the timpani. I went to Yale because I wanted to work on I was a terrible marimba player. I commissioned a lot of steel drum works. I loved percussion ensemble, which I knew Bob did a lot of, but orchestra playing was awful. I hated excerpts. And I remember going to Bob and being like,
me too.
I want to I want to get better at the things I'm terrible at. And I know this is the place to go. And so I went purposely to a place that didn't have a steel band program because not that I didn't need it. I was just like, I can't play Scheherazade, and maybe that's a thing I might need. And I remember Bob in my timpani lesson, I was and I got done, and he looks at me and he's like, I just need us to agree on something. I was like, what? And I was like, he's like, you're never going to play timpani professionally in an orchestra. And I said, and he's like, based on what I'm seeing here, based on what I'm seeing here, and based on what I know about what it takes to get an orchestra job, there's a way different level of commitment you're going to need to make moving forward. And I was like, and again, he's telling me something
Right.
like I kind of knew was true, but I don't know about the orchestra world. I don't know. I mean, I've played an orchestra, I've taken one audition, but I don't know. And so he's telling me this stuff, and I initially was like, "Fuck you, bro!" Like, I practice this
Dude,
stuff,
yeah, and
but just to be clear, he did. In fairness to him, he said to me, "So we need to make a choice. Do you want to learn how to take auditions and just really fine tune your playing so that you can get those jobs? Or are you okay being on sub lists for the rest of your life and doing something else?" And I said, well,
well, that's good.
I said,
That's
I
great.
said, I would far prefer to play bat mitzvahs and luau's my entire life on pan than ever
Yeah.
take an orchestra audition again. And he said,
Right.
okay, great, we're done. And then I basically dove
Amazing.
headfirst into my snare drum roll with him, and then how to do chamber music. And
Right.
now I have a job with So. Now that's not the like, if you just do this and do this, but as a 41-year-old, I'm
Yeah.
trying to realize like, well, what can I say to my students that is both true, potentially damaging, but is something that down the road will unpack itself over time the more experiences they have. And that's that's a fine line to walk, man. Like you can really say and I've said
Yeah.
the wrong things. I'm sure there are students who are like, I didn't want to do any music anymore
Man.
because Josh said something to me in a master class or something,
Right. Right. Well, I yeah, in situations like that, and it seems like that was a net positive
That one experience
conversation.
was. There were others,
Yeah.
but I think I had enough of those ones that were net positive where when I knew I had a bad day with Bob and
Yeah.
there was something I could be like, I'm just going to put that on the shelf.
Right.
I don't
Yeah.
need that comment maybe until I'm 70, but right now,
Yeah.
I'm going to keep these other things because I do, even though it hurt, I do know he's right. And sometimes trying to parse
Right.
that out is tricky, but and he didn't talk like that to every student. That's like I think there were some students who he could say things to me because he knew I could take a punch. And there
Right.
were other friends of mine I could see the way he talked to them was slightly nuanced and just a little bit maybe off to the side because he knew the person a little differently. But
Right. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's
I'm not trying to justify anything here. I'm just telling you that
no,
I'm
no,
empathizing
yeah,
a little bit.
it's different. It's different folks.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I definitely, there was some stuff that was said to me that like I'll never forget. And I can't see, and if I try to be like, well, what did they mean? Like, what was the lesson? Blah 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 blah. Like the thing I come back to is like, maybe there was a nicer way to say that.
Mm-hmm.
And I still believe that. That's kind of like that's a guiding point for me, just like in life. Is like, is there a nice way to say this? All right, let's do that instead. And maybe I'm too sensitive. Like, who knows? But I know that stuff is tough. And to kind of like, and I'm there and it's like constantly. I remember I was assigned at one point. I was just desperate to play like just like something I believed in,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, so you try to find pieces that are in the curriculum that satisfy that. So I was like, let me play Corporel, please let me do it. Which is not really, but I knew it was like kind of adjacent to like both things.
Yeah.
I was like, let me do it. And my teacher at the time said, no, you're going to play anvil chorus. And if you do that well, then I'll let you play Corporel. I'm like, okay. So I'm looking at anvil chorus, which is not me. It's like not a me thing, which like, it's cool and everything, but like, so I'm like, all right, how can I make this? How can I, like, what can I do to this that's gonna like, because I have the type of personality, like if I'm not invested in something, like I'm not gonna spend, like I need to trick myself into loving this. So I'm like, all right, what can I do? It's like, oh, maybe I can make the world's smallest anvil chorus setup, like like 2 bags, you know, like one trip from the car. You're like, so, like, is this possible? And it turned out it was kind of possible. And so I'm, you know, I'm probably 40% of the way, you know, I've got my setup of, you know, like, you know, the whole of like, you know, inception to like perform, like to third performance. I'm like 40% of the way through that whole thing. And I play in studio class, and like, and the note I get from the teacher and from other people, it's like, oh, that's not what animal chorus is supposed to sound like. And I'm just like, yeah, I know, but like I'm trying to, and it was just like, no, it sounds like this. And I'm just like, what are we doing? You know, like, what are we doing here? You know what I mean? And I know that, like, you know, Mr. Lang
You can call
very
him
well,
David. I mean, you can call him David. His name's David.
Yeah, David. Yeah, well, I've never met him, so you know, I'm sure there is a way that it's supposed to sound, but like, and and the thing that, like, and now, like back then, the feeling I was feeling that I couldn't really name or describe was like a great injustice, like just an enormous injustice. And now what I think it is like, if I try to like think about how I was feeling and like describe it, it's like, if we're all going to play the same music and we're all going to play it the same way, what are we doing? You know, like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
You know, and this is, and it's like, this is why the job market is so tough, is because everyone has the same skills.
I mean, the thing that I keep trying to ask myself, like, while you're talking, like, what are my blind spots? Like, where I've been in lessons where I walk, you know, I've brought something to the table, a commission. I remember having a lesson with Bob where there was a piece I commissioned, and it was a duet with me and my friend Jamie, and beautiful piece called "Lion Lying Down" by Mark Danzigers.
Great.
For steel drums and Almglocken and vibraphone and crotales. Really beautiful piece. I remember playing it.
Sounds great.
And there was no negative comments, but just sort of a, like, you know, he didn't know the piece. And one thing Bob does really, like, he can teach things like about chamber music because he knows Braintree so intimately. There's like a different level of chamber music that he's able to teach because he knows it really well. Pieces that he didn't know really well, he was respectful, but just wouldn't spend a lot of time necessarily on it because
he knew he couldn't get to that level.
Or, you know, or I don't even know if it was a conscious thing. Maybe he didn't like the piece. There's that too. But I remember feeling like, and I've seen other coachings too, where somebody just didn't like the piece, and so they refused to coach it. And I've always tried to be like, if I'm in a coaching and somebody's asked me to coach, we coach percussion ensemble pieces all the time that we don't think are great. But our job in that moment isn't necessarily to cast a value judgment on the piece. My job is to be like, well, play whatever you want, but whenever you make this sound, I think you're hindering yourself because you're choking up way too high on the stick and you'll never get a big sound like that. Like, those are the things that I feel like as a teacher, I can be like, let's just move the stick out. I hate this piece. I'm never going to say that to you, but like, my job is to make you, my job also isn't always to build taste. Like, that is a little subjective thing too. On the other hand, sometimes you have a student who comes in and you see the taste that they have is only because they're only in one siloed area of their life. And you can be like, hey, you know, I noticed that you really love Stuart Saunders Smith. Have you heard of Vinko Globokar? Have you heard of Maurizio Cock? Like, then you can sort of crack the taste door open, and then
yes and yes.
Yes and yes and yes. And like that sometimes, like, so how you teach taste without excluding other tastes is a tricky thing too.
Right.
But I'm curious for you, like, now that you're 30, you're 30? Like, now that you're 30 and you're starting to, like, I mean, one of the things for me, I'm in therapy, and my therapist is constantly telling me things like, you know, your feelings aren't proof of anything. Like, they're not proof of a final result. Like, I have anxiety. I have generalized generalized anxiety disorder, right? My dad died 11 years ago, and I think every time my finger twitches, I'm going to die of ALS.
Oof.
And, you know, and it's like, that's what you mentioned your grandmother. It's like, that's where my therapist is always like, your finger twitching and you have a feeling about dying of ALS isn't proof that you're going to die of ALS.
That you have it.
Yeah. Or that I have it, you know. And that's like, that, again, like, I don't want to discount your feeling, because sometimes your feelings, your gut instinct is right. Yeah. But sometimes now, 10 years out, I'm curious for you, like, have you been able to look at any of your past teachers. The hardest thing for me with Bob has, because it was such an intense like cauldron that burned so hot for 2 years, is it took me 10 years to step back and be like, man, I wish it would have gone a different way, but I think I'm a way better teacher now because I know what not to do. And I've been through that ringer where there wasn't any true physical danger. Like I wasn't worried about dying, but I was mentally, it was dangerous sometimes because my entire worldview would be questioned about something. And then I get in the room with Ayano and she could play circles around me and she's like so nice to me. And I'm like, I can't even keep up. Why are you talking to me? Like, that's what I felt like.
Yeah. The competitive aspect doesn't make it easier.
And so I'm curious for you, where's your head at with this stuff now? I mean, you mentioned injustice, but like, are you seeing any of this stuff in a different, more nuanced light? And have you had any discussions with your old teachers? I mean, all your old teachers are lovely people, and their products.
They are.
They're products
they
of.
Really are.
They are who they are because of everyone, including yourself, who they've bumped into, who they've taught, who they've played with, who they studied with, and so I'm not the same teacher as the folks you've studied with. It's impossible. There's no way.
Yeah,
and they're dear friends of mine who I'd take a bullet for.
Yeah, of course.
So now that you're 10 years out, is there anything that you're seeing in a slightly like that 21-year-old Alex maybe wasn't seeing clearly?
Well, I wish that I had a better vocabulary then to advocate for my tastes. Or I wish that I had that's one thing I do wish. I wish that I had as much like the vocabulary I have now, and I wish that I had the emotional intelligence I do now to navigate these things a little better. Because as far as like you were saying, like, I still think I was right. I think I was right. And I think they, singular they, were wrong. And that's how I feel. And I've thought about this a tremendous amount, and I continue. I've pretty much always felt that way. And I'm pretty confident with that assessment. It's like, yeah, I think I was right. And I think that things would have worked out better if I, in that situation, had been encouraged to follow my strengths and interests, or in any other situation. I think people turn out better if they're encouraged to follow their strengths and interests. That's, I feel like that seems right.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I mean, one of the things that I remember being scared about when I first studied with Bob was he would come in and when you talk about the curriculum, like there's this feeling
he wrote it.
Well, his version of it, but it's like he would but it's way less organized than maybe people think. Like it wasn't written down. Maybe now it wasn't when I was there, but I walked in the first week and he gave me like 30 pieces and he's like, I'll see you next week, learn it all. And I thought he was being serious. And and so I started like learning stuff, and I would freak. I was having panic attacks like every week. Like I'm never gonna learn. It was like XY, Mirage, Merlin, like learn Raintree and have it memorized. Like all
these are all pieces it takes 2 years to really learn.
Well, part of the curriculum for him though is this, just like you're gonna drink out of a fire hose, because now I walk on stage and I'm often handed a piece as I'm walking out, being like, you're going to sight read this composer's piece. And it's like, oh my God, thank God I had this fire hose shot at me for 2 years.
Yeah.
But, I lost my train of thought there. Sorry. I was just thinking about,
curriculum.
Sorry. Yeah. Like Bob would give this thing. And then somebody who had studied with Bob for a long time was like, bring into him, he just wants to coach stuff that's at a high level. So if you bring in Hawk Reiner 1 at a super high level, he'll work with you on it for like 4 hours. And I was like, oh. And so I started being like, well, he's never going to ask me to bring in a double second solo with chopsticks on steel drums. Like he's never going to want that.
I just have to do it.
So I would work up Mirage. And I would say, he would be like, what are you going to play for me today? And the first couple of weeks, I'd be like, well, I have XY, I have Mirage, I have Raintree. And we'd get through like the first 3 bars of Mirage in 3 hours. And I'd be like, why the fuck did I work on this other? So then I'd be like, well, I've got the first 20 bars of Mirage, and I'd love to play for you this piece I commissioned by my friend. And he'd be like, okay. And I was like, oh, that's the curriculum now. And I can sort of, I can push back. And I feel like if you were to go back when you were 20 and walk in the room and feel like it was
done a little bit of that.
Or just said like, hey, I have Anvil Chorus. but I also have the first page of Corporel worked up. Like, don't even give your teacher the option to say no. Be like, I have it and I'm ready to go. And
Right.
stand there with your shirt off and in your shorts and ready to rock.
Right.
You know,
Exactly.
like
Just
that's.
begin to disrobe.
But
Yeah.
what I want students who might be listening to this to learn from both me and you is that, like, as a teacher, when somebody comes to the table with something, if they ask for permission, it's way harder to get permission. And if
Mm,
you come to the table with, it's way easier to ask for forgiveness. Like, if you come to the table,
like,
you're like,
yeah,
I got all these
it's
things worked up, and they're like, well,
like
where's it?
this is what I have.
You're
Would
like, well,
you
where's
like
it? Where's
Yeah.
Anvil Chorus? And you're like, well, I got the first 10 bars of that. You could be like, I'm really sorry. But as long as you're badass in that 10 bars of Anvil Chorus,
Yeah.
you've bought yourself a little bit of currency. And, like,
Yeah.
that took me a
No,
second to learn. So
that would have been good. That would have, that would have been good if I had done that. You know, yeah, I was in the whirlwind, man. You know what I mean?
well, this
Like,
is,
I didn't.
I understand. I mean, I'm saying all these things is like, it's the obvious thing in hindsight. Like, but
Yeah, of course.
you know,
Yeah.
my dad, I mentioned my dad died when I was on the road, and the way I view so percussion is I harbor resentments towards my bandmates that aren't fair to them,
Right.
because
And that's yeah.
I
That
blame
rings
them.
so true for me.
I blame them for making me be with them when my dad was dying.
That dude.
That's
the
not
exact-
true. They didn't
No,
do
yeah.
that, you know? Like, that's
I know.
my shit.
That's the exact same feeling I have with my grandmother.
Your grandmother
It's
was
like,
dying, and they made you play Anvil Chorus.
yeah.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
though, that's
The
not
timeline
fair.
on-
You know,
the timeline on that isn't quite right. But
it's not fair to you, but it's also not fair to your teacher either. Like, that's
No,
not.
it's not.
That's tricky.
I kind of ended up viewing, because it was it was dementia, so it's like long, slow, similar.
The worst.
And it was like, and I just couldn't, like, I didn't have any money. I couldn't even go home, like, and it just kind of threw everything. Things already weren't going great, and it threw it into this sickly light,
Yep.
and it's just hard to, like, make a good thing in those conditions,
I totally agree.
And it all just, it just went from bad to worse, so, and not to get too much of a bummer, but I was thinking last couple of days, is like, all right, so, like, what am I gonna say, like, on this podcast, like, these people that, what's a thing that I know that was never said to me, and what I've come up with is, at no point in my undergrad or graduate did somebody look me in the eye and say, so this you might not make it, like, everything might come crashing down, and you might have to move away, you might have to, like, have a different career, and, like, and that'll be fine,
I think it's the last thing you said, which is the crucial part. Like, the pressure, the feeling that we have in music is that it's like an accountant, you can be good at math. If you have a good calculator, you can do it, right? But just because you have a good marimba doesn't mean you can play it well. Just because you have a set of steel drums in your office doesn't mean you're going to get hired. Like, it's way messier. And the idea that if you don't, like when I said earlier about becoming a 5th or 6th grade band director, like, no one ever said to me that would be okay. It was implied that if I wasn't a college teacher or a performer in an orchestra, that would be a second tier job. And it was never said to me, but it's okay. I actually want to teach 5th and 6th grade band right now. Like, that's okay.
Well, yeah. And then, personally, like, in the second year I was at, I was at school, and, and in kind of the fallout from that, I kind of felt like my connection to art just slowly being severed for me, like, it's just like, every time I would like, like, all right, I'm really going to try this time, you know what I mean? And it's just like, and it's just panic attack, it's something, like, everything. I'm just like unbearably sad about it, and it's just like, I felt like there's this knot, just growing and getting more complicated. I'm just like, oh man, this is, and then like I graduate, I moved back to the East Coast, and I just like, I can't even, like, I try to practice just like out of habit. I'm in the habit of practicing.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just like, all right, maybe I'll do this. And I put up like the, I don't know if Steve Schick came up with this, but he popularized it. He said, practice like you have infinite time, and I put that note up on my like my practice space. And I was like, okay, I can, and it didn't work,
Mm-hmm.
And I just like, and I couldn't, like, I was just like monumentally sad and upset all the time. And I just couldn't even, like, the ways in which like I could communicate with art were just broken, and because of a number of competing and collaborating factors, that's just what happened. So I just ended up like doing other stuff. And then like, I'm not currently in therapy, but I've spent a lot of time in therapy since then. And I remember one therapist said to me, I was just kind of like explaining, I was like, this is what happened, and this is how I feel. And I don't want to feel this way, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, you've experienced a loss. Like,
Mm-hmm.
she's like the loss of your grandmother and the loss of your connection to art are like equally strong.
Mm-hmm.
These are two like defining characteristics, like your relationship with your grandparents and your desire to share art with people are two like foundational aspects, and you lost both.
Was your grandmother an artist?
No, but she is an incredibly wonderful and nurturing woman. I mean, she, not professionally, she was she played piano and sung in the church choir and stuff.
But supportive of the arts.
Yeah. She's supportive of everything. She was the best. And she's like, this, you've experienced a loss, like, and she's like, it might be constructive or illuminating for you to think of, like, to try to diagnose your feelings or understand your feelings about this if you think about them in that way. And I was like, wow, that's really, that's one of those like, head explosion therapy moments. I was like, wow, that really has a ring of truth to it. So like, that was really constructive to me. And then, so how, pandemic starts, right? About a year ago. And everybody starts baking.
Yeah.
Everybody does sourdough. So I kind of had a 6 or 8 month head start on everybody with that. Because I'm working in restaurants and I'm like not super enjoying it. And I'm like, I'm pretty depressed because like, the restaurant thing was like a good lifeboat because like I just needed a job, so like I started getting restaurant jobs. And then I'm just like, I start really, really butting up against like, I'm not making anything. I'm not doing anything that I like, like I need like this thing I do every day to be like, I'd experienced enough healing to just kind of like look around and take stock and be like, okay, so what are we doing? And I'm like, well, being a bar manager isn't it, it's not really giving me the juice that I need. So I start trying to take baking really seriously, just trying to make bread and pie and stuff like as good as I possibly can. And I monetized this hobby instantly.
Good. I mean, I have a former student, Jacqueline Russo, or Jacqueline Eng is her married name now, and she runs a bakery called the Party Bus Bake Shop, and she was always baking stuff and bringing it to steel band rehearsals, and I'm so glad she's doing that, and not because she shouldn't be playing percussion, but like she's so happy she started her own business, and it's awesome. And her anyway.
Well, no, it is, and so like I started kind of doing that like apropos of almost nothing, and I was, there was a different therapist this time. I'm talking to him, and it was like the third session. I don't know how many new therapists you've had, but how like the first couple sessions are kind of like a download, and then like whether it's going to work out or not, because like around the third or fourth session they'll start to like give you insights, and you're like, oh, okay, this is gonna be good. So like one of the first things this guy said to me, and he's like, my grandfather and my grandfather's still with us, and I'm really close with him as well. And I spent summers with him, just working for him. And it was like this really great experience. And he's just such a smart guy. I've learned so much from him. So he's like, I think your relationship with your grandfather, your connection, your now tenuous connection to music and baking I think those are the same thing. And he's like, you are attracted to situations in which your creativity and expertise are rewarded. And I was like, whoa, you're so right. Like, and so, I'm just like, I'm taking, so, my wife and I moved, to Illinois because, she's going to U of I to get her doctorate. And I'm just out here. I've got a job in a bakery, and I've got a job like at this donut shop, and I've got like my side hustle Instagram bakery.
Well,
and that's just what I'm doing.
Well, Alex, unfortunately, I have to be at a meeting at 12:30. But here's what I want to do. I want to pause this and do a part. Well, not pause it. We'll stop this one and do a part 2, because I feel like, you just laid out a bunch of awesome, really vulnerable stuff, and I want to talk about it, but I can't right now, and that's silly.
No, you have a thing. Yeah. So
let's book part 2. But I do want to just put a button on part 1 here by saying the way you talk about baking, the way you're talking about baking, your face lights up in a different way than it does when you talk about Stuart Smith's music. And it seems to me
my face used to light up that way when I talked.
Doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter. Yeah. It does now. And I gotta say,
and I'm aware of that.
I just have to say that
that's what's guiding me right now.
Getting assigned Anvil Chorus might have been the best thing for your taste buds as a 30-year-old man.
I think. Well, we can certainly address that in part 2.
I know it's not that simple, but like,
it certainly isn't. It certainly is not. But I see what you're saying.
But I will say it is. I
still wish I never played Anvil Chorus.
Well, unfortunately, you can't unplay Anvil Chorus. So like,
I cannot unplay Anvil Chorus.
You shouldn't try.
But I still have all the pedals and ribbon crashers.
That's the ribbon crasher. The ribbon crasher market really shot through the roof when David Lang wrote that piece. But
it was that and like really specific college drum lines.
I should also mention, you should email David Lang the video of your piece, of your version of Anvil Chorus, because he would be supportive of it 100%, because I was in Russia with him and he heard one guy do 2 different versions, one with huge battle axes and another one that fit inside of a shoebox by the same person. And David came back and he was like, guys,
yeah, there's no video because that idea got shut down.
Well, whatever, but really just to say, like, David, it never crossed his mind that that's what somebody could do with his piece. And when he saw it, he was like, like, he's like, he wanted to go in and write in that was a possibility, so he could claim it as his own idea. Anyway, just to say, like,
do you know what year that was?
This would have been like 2007 or 8 when we were in Russia.
Oh my God, I really wish.
Well, another thing,
the score.
When the composer's alive, reach out and ask them. They may give you the permission you're looking. Anyway, Alex, I have really enjoyed part 1, and I want to sort of like, let's pause this and jump back into part 2. We'll email and schedule a time, but I think
absolutely,
I'm thankful for your time, and I really am grateful for your generosity of spirit here and being willing to share all this stuff. And so we'll pick up where we left off for part 2.
Good. Yeah, it's been a real pleasure speaking with you.
Well, likewise,
can't wait to do it again.
Look forward to the next one. Thanks, buddy. Take it easy. Have a good one and stay healthy. Okay.
Yep. You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. This podcast is brought to you by Liquid Drum, liquiddrum.com down in Waco, Texas. My good friend Todd Meehan runs an amazing percussion company down there. Great merch, great content. Check him out, liquiddrum.com. Also, Kyle Dunleavy, dunleavypans.com, DUNLEAVY pans.com. Kyle Dunleavy makes and builds all the steel drums that I perform and teach on, in So Percussion, as well as at NYU and Princeton. He's an amazing tuner, builder, just a really nice guy, very dependable. Check him out. If you are interested at all in steel pan advocacy, Want to learn more about the goings-on in Pan in Brooklyn? Check out paninmotion.com. My good friend Kendall Williams, Jerry Guy, Trisha Guy, and Arisha John run an amazing organization called paninmotion.com. Check them out. And finally, Alejandro Mirage runs an amazing clothing apparel company in Brooklyn that is steel pan centric. You can check him out at mangochow, CHOW, clothing.com. I own a bunch of his shirts. They're amazing, very stylish, beautifully made. Check them out. mangochowclothing.com. Okay, hope you're well. Talk to you soon. Bye.